This is Real Talk, though. This is our community newsroom where we bring the news to you, and we have you be part of the news. And today we're talking about violence and what we can do to address violence. The media, and we are part of the media as well, we're often guilty of focusing too much on the negative. And between events this year in Baltimore and the Tangerine tornado in the White House, there's a lot of reasons to not have hope. And there's a lot of reasons to give up and to feel overwhelmed. But we can't let that happen. We need to also talk about positive things that are happening and models for change. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. More than 22 people have been shot since Friday in this city. But there's groups here that are fighting that and are making a difference. And we're going to be joined in just a minute by our expert panel. But first, we put together a report to introduce you guys to Baltimore Ceasefire and the impact it's making in this city. Can we play that clip?
One life lost in the city is one too many. And when you have over 300 people being lost constantly in a city, it's easy to be numb, and then it hits home. Because Baltimore is big, but it's not that big. And I lost my niece to murder. At least, I believe everybody in the ceasefire squad has lost someone to murder, at least one person.
Despite spending over $500 million a year on policing, Baltimore continues to be one of America's most dangerous cities. Baltimore's averaged nearly 300 murders a year for the past 12 years. Most of them are carried out by guns, which are easy to obtain. For decades, violence has remained entrenched in red-lined black neighborhoods, marked with high levels of poverty, lead poisoning, and a lack of opportunities. But a holistic, grassroots approach is helping make a difference. Ceasefire weekends, which have been happening 4 times a year since 2017.
From Friday, 12:01 a.m. through Sunday, 11:59 p.m., we ask for people to commit to no murder, no violence, and to participate in what we call life-affirming events.
They spread the message through social media, flyers, and monthly meetings across the city. Thanks to a grant from OSI Baltimore, MTA buses and billboards will also be spreading the word about the upcoming ceasefire from November 1st through 3rd. And now there is proof they actually do lower the rates of gun violence.
When you have somebody being murdered in your city once every 19 hours, the idea of accomplishing 72 hours with no murder is huge.
Data analyst Peter Phelan crunched the numbers on ceasefire's impact. He found the city sees anywhere from a 30 to 66% fewer shootings in Baltimore during ceasefire weekends. His research also found the results of ceasefire weekends can extend well after those 3 days are over, sometimes lowering the rate of gun violence for as long as 12 days. Another tactic that's gotten results is Safe Streets, an alternative approach to reducing violence that's found to lower non-fatal shootings by 26 to 54%. Safe Streets enlist people from the community, not cops, to act as violence interrupters, stopping beef before it becomes deadly. Safe Streets peacekeeper Alex Long was recently featured in the award-winning documentary Charm City.
We got 171 dead black people. That's not a state of emergency.
Most of these kids been through so much trauma, they don't have nothing to look forward to. That's why I do what I do with the kids. I seen the difference in the community.
But many argue to truly make Baltimore a safer city, the government needs to directly address the root causes of violence. For example, studies have found extreme inequality is a major predictor of violence.
But the fact of the matter is that racism, oppression, anti-Blackness, those things are very, very real, and they manifest in ways where Black people don't value other Black people. Police don't value Black people. Politicians don't value the people that they are taught or hired to represent. And so when you have systems in place that on purpose create a hierarchy of who deserves to be recognized as a human and who does not, and tricks people into fighting one another instead of fighting the systems and recognizing the systems as being the problem.
For The Real News, This is Jess Lenore in Baltimore.
So, Latrice, we just heard from you in that story from an interview we did last week. And what you said really reminded me of something D. Watkins wrote in his new book. It was published earlier this year. And he said, killers aren't born, they're made that way. And that's really kind of what you were addressing. We talk about violence as people killing each other, but also there's state violence. We live in the richest country in the history of the world. We're in the richest state in that country. And the conditions with lead poisoning, with poverty, with the underfunding in our schools, that is also a form of violence. So continue on that. And I guess start off by just telling us a little bit about how you got involved in this.
So Baltimore Ceasefire is a community-led movement. We're not an organization. We're a set of people in Baltimore who love Baltimore City. So as amazing as the movement is, and as I don't like to use the word viral, because I don't like the idea of talking about viruses, but as viral as the movement has become, we do this in our spare time. So we work, we have children, we have families, and the six of us, there are 6 co-organizers for Baltimore Ceasefire, come together regularly. A lot of the decisions that get made about ceasefire happen in a Facebook chat. So we get the work done. We talk about our values and what we want to see for Baltimore City, and we have the audacity to believe that the energy that we can create, the way that we can galvanize people in Baltimore City, that we can match the arrogance of murder energy. Murder energy is very arrogant. It believes that it can show up wherever it feels like. It believes that it can impact people however it sees fit. And as organizers for the Baltimore Ceasefire movement, we believe that love and peace and that the respect that we have for one another as human beings, that we can come together and essentially clip what murder does and remind people of their humanity and remind us that every life is important, and that focusing on one another when we have conflict in ways that ends in violence doesn't have to be the way. Conflict is inevitable. Murder does not have to be.
Thank you. So Alex Long, you work with Safe Streets now, but you've been involved in your community for years. You started the Team Redemption boxing gym for young people. So you've been giving your whole life, basically. So talk about what ceasefire means to you as someone that's been so committed to your community and to helping stop violence.
Honestly, it's just an opportunity for everybody to really sit back and just be humble and appreciate each other. I think we fail to realize our society has created a bunch of vigilantes, you know, and it's not really looked at like that. But when you have so much injustice happening in your community and you just tired of the hurt and pain, you know, so many times you feel like you have to take it amongst yourself. Fortunately for me, I was able to do that in a positive way. You know, I was able to channel it and focus on the youth in my community and create the program to give them an outlet and an opportunity. But a lot of people truly don't have that opportunity. You know, so we got a lot of hurt souls that's walking around our cities right now. You know, and you know, for ceasefire, that's just a moment for like I say, for everybody to just sit back and just take a moment and just really appreciate, you know, what the people in the city is truly trying to do, because we're investing in ourselves. You know, we're really taking an opportunity to save our kids' lives. You know, to have somebody put down a gun, and even if it's temporarily, you know, is a huge, huge opportunity for a child to see their parent come through those doors. You know, so we really have to understand, like, these little small things mean so much. You know, we gotta take a full advantage of it. So,
You know, I just tell everybody, just remember, it's just a moment to just be humble and just really appreciate what you have, because we see every day, there's no guarantees that you walking back through these doors. You know, so truly, you know, be blessed and happy while you're here.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. And I want to remind you, folks here in our live audience, we'll be taking questions in a few minutes. So, you know, we hope you have some ideas and some questions you want to ask our great panelists here. And for folks online, we have our social media team that's going to be sending me your questions, so please send those in. So Peter, you're a therapist and a researcher living in the city, and you uncovered some really incredible data about ceasefire, because I know when it started, there was a lot of naysayers and people that were saying that this is crazy, it's never going to work. But talk about what you found, that on average, shootings declined by some 50%. And I hope I'm not messing up those numbers, but you are the numbers guy. So tell us what you found.
Yeah, and there's always uncertainties and estimates, I suppose, but the point estimate is about 52% reduction in shootings after you account for everything else, right? So seasonal trends, the relative increase in shootings that we've seen in the past several years. There's a 52% reduction on every ceasefire day as compared to days outside of ceasefire in the same time of year and the same point in time. And that's the point estimate, right? So that's our best bet, but there is uncertainty. So we have, with these estimates, kind of a lower bound and an upper bound, right? So what's the worst case and the best case scenario for how big of an effect ceasefire is having right now, and maybe how good of an effect it'll have in the future? And you can estimate that pretty rigorously. And so the worst case scenario is that ceasefire has about a third decrease. So there's about a third fewer shootings during ceasefire days than outside of ceasefire days, meaning that it's very unlikely that the effect is any weaker than that. And the best case estimate is that there's about a 2/3 reduction, 67%, 66% reduction in shootings on ceasefire days. So between a 1/3 to 2/3 reduction in shootings on these days.
That's incredible. So Latrice, there's a ceasefire coming up. And
Yes, there is.
can you tell us, so it's November 1st through 3rd.
Yes.
And I was at one of the meetings last week, and there's about 6 or 7 different people that showed up talking about different events that they're organizing. Talk about what's going to be happening on that weekend and where people can go to learn more.
Absolutely. So the November ceasefire is November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Ceasefire weekends occur 4 times a year. Every year, February, May, August, and November. August is the anniversary of ceasefire weekend. To be clear, one of the reasons that in our narrative we say that ceasefire starts at 12:01 a.m. on Friday and that it ends at 11:59 p.m. on Sunday is because it is clear to us that we get to determine for ourselves what this movement looks like, what it feels like. We are not naive. We do recognize that the trauma that causes people to want to murder or to feel like they have to murder is real. And it's not something that happened overnight. It's not something that Ceasefire and Safe Streets is going to be able to get rid of overnight. But we're very clear that if someone is murdered during a ceasefire weekend, that the ceasefire is not over. Part of the reason that we are very adamant about that language is because people plan what we call life-affirming events. So if you go to the Baltimore Ceasefire calendar, you'll see anywhere from 12 to maybe 50 events, depending on how enthusiastic people are about planning events for Ceasefire Weekend. Imagine what happens if someone is murdered Friday morning, and all across media, all you hear is, oh, the ceasefire is over, the ceasefire is over. So people turn their backs on the movements, they turn their backs on the events, and then people don't have access to the resources that they need. It's part of the reason that it is very important for everyone to buy into this idea that ceasefire is 72 hours. November ceasefire weekend is 73 hours because we happen to call it on the weekend that is daylight savings time weekend. So it's actually 73 that we have to get through. And we definitely don't want to disrespect, denigrate, or disregard the efforts that real people in the community who decided for themselves that they wanted to do something to help other people in Baltimore City. So we don't want to disregard or ignore that. So if you, and this is a call to action for everybody in the room. If you ever hear media say someone died during ceasefire weekend and the ceasefire is over, please take to their Twitter, their Facebook, their social media, and say very adamantly, the ceasefire is not over. It ends at 11:59 p.m. on Sunday.
Thank you for that. So Alex, you help run a gym for young people, and those kind of services are hard. Those kind of opportunities and services are hard to come by in a lot of neighborhoods in Baltimore. What kind of impact does that make? Just having that opportunity, having someone there for them, having a mentor. What kind of impact does that make? And do we need more of that?
Once again, like I stated before, it's really just an outlet for our kids. I really don't look at myself like a mentor, because at the end of the day, I'm still learning and trying to find myself, so I can't sit up here and say I got the answer for no child and you should do this and you should do that. But what I really try to focus on and get the kids to understand is right now, you're being robbed of something that will truly be missed, and most of our kids really grow up as adults. That's why it's so hard for many of us to reach them. When you have to take on the burden and responsibility of your mom and dad, your teacher can't tell you nothing. Your guidance counselor can't tell you nothing, and that's where our kids are. So I really just try to get them, like I say with boxing, an outlet to relieve that tension that's built up throughout the day. Us as adults every day face situations where we honestly want to punch somebody in the face. We just deal with it differently, so I'm teaching our kids that right now, conflict resolution, coping, all these skills, they learn it now. So when they're really put in that fire situation, it's not so critical and so serious. Everything right now is to the extreme. It's no second chances. It got to happen now. So I really try to give my kids an opportunity to just understand, man, just pause and take a second. I can't determine nothing you're going to do, nor can your parents. But if you really sit back and you think, and that's the best decision you come up with, then at the end of the day, that's the best decision you came up with. But you at least thought it out, Once you behind on walls, it's too late to think it out. So, like I say, it's really just an outlet. And I want to say that I don't help run. I did start and found Team Redemption in my basement, actually, So I definitely take pride in that because the kids in my community, they love it. I have a partnership with Creative Alliance in Tench-Tillman Elementary, so I teach the after-school program there. And like I say, it's been a huge, huge impact, on the kids and the school.
Peter, beyond just the numbers that you shared with us, what else is important for people to know about ceasefire from your perspective?
I wish you'd run these questions by me before. So maybe these are numbers things, but it's something I was thinking about like earlier today, I suppose, when I was preparing for this discussion a little bit, so one thing is that the more I kind of dove into this data, the more I sort of realized how smart some of the moves were that ceasefire was making from the beginning, which I didn't know because I'm not as familiar with Baltimore as you guys are, but there's two ways in which that's true that I can explain, which is, one is that from watching your TED Talk, Erica, for example, I know that you guys were already planning for a shooting, for a death even, to occur during the very first ceasefire. And that's a pretty somber thing to do, to be like, we're gonna start a ceasefire and we're already preparing for someone to die during it. But But one thing I realized from modeling all these shootings is that, first of all, there are a lot of shootings in Baltimore. So the deaths that you hear about are about 30% of the shootings that occur in the streets of Baltimore. So about 30% of shootings end in death. So when we hear about 300 shootings or 300 homicides this year, that means there were, so bad at math, there were 900, there were 900 shootings, almost 1,000 shootings. So that's a lot of shootings. And so ceasefire can be massively effective, and there can still be shootings every day of ceasefire, right? I mean, we're talking about reductions here, not zeroing out the numbers, which is sad but also true. And so it was phenomenal to me to see the ceasefire effect show up in the data, and it shows up very strongly. When I say there's a worst case scenario of a 1/3 reduction in shootings, that's unheard of. If you look at the plots of these estimates, we're talking estimates that you can actually see, you can watch ceasefires happen on the plot of shootings. So these are massive reductions. And yet still, shootings don't zero out on these weekends. So that was one thing that I think was really powerful for me to see as I was looking through this data, and to see that you were already anticipating that, and you were already anticipating that was the case, that would be the case. I guess another thing that was really striking to me, and another move that I understand you guys, you can speak to this, but I understand you guys decided on a little bit into ceasefire, was your refocusing on from just the ceasefires to a year-round peace-building effort. And that was really apparent to me in the data too, right? Because ceasefires happen 4 times a year. There's 3 days each time. There's that means there's 24 days of ceasefire or something in every 2-year span. That's a specific number of days, and it's a small number of days. And it's possible for ceasefires to be incredibly effective, for there to be huge reductions, maybe even zeroing out of the shootings on these days, and still for violence to be a huge problem in Baltimore, right? And in fact, that's what you see in the data to some extent, is that shootings, as we all know, well, as most of us know, increased a lot in 2015. They stayed high. And if you look at the most recent data, they're increasing again. So I've updated, I get these numbers with only really a 2 or 3 week delay. It's actually really impressive that the city releases this data. And so I know that we're in another increase right now. So shootings are increasing across the city. We're in an increase again. And one thing that Baltimore Ceasefire did, and you're gonna have to speak maybe right after this about the time frame and explain your reasoning. And I don't know, I'm curious to hear about it, but it seemed obvious to me when I saw the numbers of oh, of course this has to become something bigger than ceasefire for there to be, for violence to stop, we have to go beyond these days. And so my understanding is that Baltimore Ceasefire rebranded as Baltimore Ceasefire 365 to say, look, this needs to be a year-round peace-building effort, not just these days. And that's something, and you'd asked me to talk about other than numbers. These are really numbers-based things, but it was really interesting to just see that. And every time I would model a new part of the data, I'd just be oh, damn. They were thinking this through way ahead of time.
Yeah, if you want to pick up on that.
So when we had the first ceasefire public meeting, May 2017, and we decided to call the ceasefire the first weekend in August 2017, from the time, I feel like there was about 3 months where we just went hard, and we were doing a lot of fundraising and getting the word out in community and getting people to wear T-shirts and flyers and posters and taking it to the streets. So one of the critiques about ceasefire was, okay, after this weekend, then what? Y'all gonna just go back to letting people kill each other? And that's how the idea of Baltimore Ceasefire 365 came about, which is one of the reasons that I tell people all the time, I don't have issues with criticism and critique because there are answers that are in criticism and critique. If nobody would have asked the question, we may not have Ceasefire 365 right now, but it was one of the things that we were prompted to think about. So the reason that we call quarterly ceasefires is because we recognize that it takes about 3 months to get the city revved up and excited about it again. And if we got the city that excited about it in 3 months, then we can get the city excited about it every 3 months. People can plan, start planning events every quarter of the ceasefire, or if somebody just has a really bright idea, then they can execute that idea within that 3 months time span. And spending the time in between, networking with community, meeting with community, hosting public meetings, educating people about the movement, we just do our best to use our time as wisely as possible.
Thank you. So I have one more question for the panelists, and then we're going to turn it over to everyone here. So there's a microphone in the back of this room. So if anyone has a question, you can line up back there, and we'll try to get to everybody. Yeah, please, thank you. So my final question to all of you is, there's going to be a really big election coming up in April, and as you know, as everyone knows, all these races get decided in the primary. And in Baltimore, I don't know if everyone knows this, but Baltimore gives its mayor more power than any other large city. Mayor controls the budget, mayor controls spending, mayor controls appointments, a lot of power. And so who the mayor is and what kind of mayor we have is going to be really important. I'm not going to ask anyone to endorse anyone tonight, but
Because we won't.
right, and Ceasefire does not endorse candidates. But I want to ask each of you, and we can start with Latrice. What are you looking for in a mayor? What kind of, and not just mayor, right? City council president. What kind of platforms are you looking for? What are the issues that are going to help end violence the most?
So, for me, a candidate who understands that violence is that violence and murder are public health issues. A candidate who understands that we cannot prison and police our way out of this epidemic. A candidate who understands that investing in community and investing financially, emotionally, psychologically into their community has a both short and long-term effect for its city. A candidate who like really gets that politics can be used to heal people the same way that it has been used to oppress people. So, flipping that on its head and really creating a people-centered, community-centered platform, that's the politician that would get my vote.
Alex, any thoughts?
Honestly, for me, it would be the politician, and I might make a lot of people mad with this, that doesn't treat the city like the new version of the dope game. You know, a lot of these politicians out here, you know, use their position as a way to just quick flip and, you know, better themselves and their lives, you know, but the city is still left in turmoil and nobody really cares, you know. So if we can just get somebody in here that truly understand that we done left a lot of people stranded and we really gonna have to get back to providing for everyone. No matter how many programs we drop in the city, until we really get the resources that our residents need, the programming really don't mean anything. All the successful programs have an abundance of resources that they can bring to any community that they're dropped in that actually benefits the community. And we're really forgetting about that, you know. So for these politicians that's out here, you know, just looking for the quick flip, man, y'all killing our city and y'all kids, truth be told, because it's no longer just in the inner city, it's hitting home.
Thank you. Peter?
I'm here to learn just like you are, and you know, yeah, these are great answers, and I believe this too now.
Great. Yeah, so we want to open it up to our audience. So we have our first question.
Hi there. Thanks,
Hi,
panelists,
Shantae.
for joining us.
Hello.
So I want to thank Peter for quantifying and qualifying in real terms that are undeniable for folks the impact of the ceasefire movement. Thank you. I want to thank Alex for putting your life on the line every single day with all your Safe Street brethren and sistren,
Appreciate
because
that.
you're standing in front of guns to prevent people from shooting each other. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, definitely.
So my question is for all of you, but probably starts with Latrice. So Daniel Webster is a staunch supporter, right? We all know what he does. He's a staunch supporter not only of the Cure Violence model that Safe Streets employs here in Baltimore City, but also of the ceasefire movement. Can you talk for a second in very real and explicit terms about the conversations that you have to have with folks leading up to ceasefire that convince them to put the guns down?
So, when we do ceasefire outreach, so we're in the community with flyers and posters, having real-time conversation with people about the experiences they have. And you'd be amazed at the things that you learn about people when you just sit and listen to them. Not passing judgment on people for the decisions that they make, understanding that they are not responsible for their circumstances. They are responsible for their choices, but they're not responsible for their circumstances. And injecting hope into people. I recognize that a reflex of violence sometimes is a manifestation of hopelessness. And so asking people to think differently, not pleading, but like really having conversation with people and asking them to think differently about the choices that they make. Because I'm just a regular person. I'm out here. I don't know you. I love you. I know that that might not mean anything to you right now. But one of the things that we like to say about ceasefire, like, once you hear the message, you can't unhear it. So once you hear me tell you that you don't know me, but I love you, you can't unhear that. Once you hear me say to you that you deserve to live, no matter how many times society has told you that your life ain't worth anything, I'm here to tell you that it is. And that we don't want to lose you. Like that's really what doing outreach is about. And for some people, that's too emotional, it's too pie in the sky. But for some people, that's the only love that they've gotten all day long, or all week long, or all month long. And so, really taking time to humanize people, like really spending time humanizing people, is something that we specialize in. And we don't know who the shooters are, so I have no idea who I'm talking to when I'm out in the street, but I know that spirit leads me to talk to who I need to talk to. And so it's just, that's the work. And for anybody who says the ceasefire is just us showing up every 3 months for 3 days telling people not to kill people, that's just, you really are showing me that you don't understand who we are. There is no way that you can know Erica Bridgeford and think that all we do is show up every 3 months and tell people not to kill people. So.
Just if I could be quick, it's everything that the young lady to my left just said, but it's also really about leverage. You know, people really fail to realize that it's impossible to tell a robber or a shooter not to rob or shoot when that's how they feed their families. You know, so it truly starts with, like I say, being invested into your community. You know, and with ceasefire, like I say, it's an abundance of resources that come into these communities that's usually never there. You know, so we have to keep this in mind, man. It's really about providing these communities with the resources that's needed, because nobody want to kill their childhood friend. But once you start stepping on my toes and I can't feed my kids and you flashy, then you no longer my friend. So it's those things that often leads to most of these homicides, man. People in competition to eat. So we gotta make it it's plentiful for everybody to eat. And you won't see these homicides. You go to Harbor East, ain't nobody down there trying to rob or kill nobody, because they got something to look forward to. So that's what truly make these things successful, is that we're giving our communities opportunities to have a shot at life.
Thank you.
My name is Simon. I'm a trauma surgeon in Brooklyn and ambassador of Baltimore Ceasefire. Good to see you guys.
Hi, Simon.
I want to make a comment, but I promise I have a question. When I became a ceasefire ambassador, I was a fellow of trauma and critical care at Hopkins, and I was showing up every day, and they were bringing us the bodies, people who were shot on, Monument or Broadway or Rose Street or North Avenue or Old York Road. And what I want to thank Latrice and Erica and everyone from Ceasefire was offering me a different way to show up. You know what I mean? There were times where I would show up for someone who was brought in and we had no chance to resuscitate them, and then I would embrace their family the next day, you know what I mean, on the corner where they had been killed. What I want to say to Peter is I appreciate you, and I want to congratulate you for the analysis that you have done. And what I think you have shown is a proof of concept, and that is that when we show up, we can make a difference. On those weekends, we cut shootings by 50%, and I wish Giselle and anyone else who has the visuals show the point on the graph of that paper that we're writing that shows what goes on during the time since Ceasefire started. It's so apparent. And so one story that I wanted to say is that, when I was showing up on the corners where people had been killed, the sacred space rituals, whenever someone was killed, we would say their name, we would embrace their family, their community would show up. Sometimes it was 2, 3, 5 people. If it was someone close to us, it was dozens, maybe 100. But I always felt like it should be thousands of people showing up every single time somebody gets shot. So that's my way of proposing, how do we show up now that we know that showing up makes a difference? But I want to pose that question to Latrice and to Alex particularly. How do we show up now that we know that showing up makes a difference?
Thank you.
No problem. Honestly, it truly kind of gets to the community. Like you say, if it's somebody that you love, it's hundreds of people there. But if it's somebody nobody care about or know, it's nobody. At the work that I do at Safe Streets, when we do our shooting response and our candlelight visuals, we see it. Unfortunately, myself, with my sister candlelight visual, it was wonderful. As sad as that sound, hundreds of people showed up from across the city that truly loved that girl. So when we really get back to community, and gentrification has truly kind of destroyed that, and it really, like I say, if you look at most of the communities where you see an uptick in shootings, you'll notice that's the main reason. It's because you'll see a lot of transient moving, people from outside communities that now they moved into other communities because where they were, they can no longer be, and we're kind of once again pitted against each other, so we really have to get back to a community model, and it kind of start with the changing of the norms of how we really think in everyday society, as long as, like I say, I view you as my enemy, that's what you are. When you die, I'm glad. I'm gonna celebrate. Like, I'm not gonna sit up here and mourn for you, and so a lot of times we got a lot of people, like I said, that been hurt, and when they see the enemy and sense, take a loss, that's their celebration. You know, so we really gotta get back to really embracing each other, man, and supporting each other. And we don't have that in no community in a city that's underdeveloped. You know, so that's how you really get back to the people showing up and showing out. Get back to the community. Get back to people caring about each other.
So, people in Baltimore who do community work, especially healing work, are stretched probably to their limits because we show up consistently, we show up regularly. We sometimes don't see our children and our loved ones because we are out in community doing the work. I need for people to understand that you don't have to have a master's degree in psychology. You don't have to run a nonprofit. You don't have to have any kind of specialized anything to hold space in Baltimore City. There is only one requirement, and that is that you show up. It shouldn't only be for somebody that you know. It shouldn't only be for somebody who you are intimately connected with. Violence is viral. And holding space for people means way more than you know. You learn things about yourself and you learn things about others while you are in community. I understand that some people are hesitant to come into communities to hold space because they are not from those communities. And at the same exact time, I challenge everyone to be just a bit more courageous and to trust that if Spirit tells you to show up in a space, that that's the space that you're supposed to be in, and that nothing is going to happen to you in that space.
We have another question from the audience.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi,
I don't have a
Jerry.
question.
Can
I
you
have
also say your name?
Jerry Thomas. I don't have a question. I have a comment to piggyback on to answer some of what was Shantae's question. So, one, it may have been the first or second ceasefire. Just so people can hear this, I would go out like ungodly hours of the night because I knew who was out there at night. And what I experienced just going handing out things, and you know, like you get out your car, people don't recognize your car, and then they're like, you know, looking, and I get out, and then they look, and they like, "Mine," like people I don't know. They like, "Mine, what you doing out here?" As I'm out here because you out here, right? So I hand some flyers, and this young man, like everybody took it respectfully, and one man was like, "Nah, I ain't about that. No, I don't want that." And I said, "Okay." And so, you know, they was like, "Yo, don't," you know, and I was like, "No, we good. You know, he don't want it. It's okay." And because we're not trying to force anything, and he had his reasons, so he kept saying, "No, you don't understand. You don't understand." I said, "Well, help me understand." Like what? You know, he said, "No, sometimes we got to kill the killers. We out here doing our thing. We not trying to like do the we ain't about that." I have heard that so many times. Is that it's all kind of reasons. I'm gonna just say it's all kind of reasons why people get killed or getting killed, and it's not always what people might think. I know you know. I know you know, and I don't even know you, but because of what you do, I know you know. And I literally have a job where I see them over the wall every day. But that's my part of doing community. But so what I was able to say to that young man when he said, "Well, sometimes we gotta kill the killers," I said, "I get that. I heard you. I understand." And what I'm gonna say, that's where he is, that's his life, that's his reality. Like you said, they helping to feed, like you said, their families, like all the reasons, right? And I said, but what I want to tell you is that you kill the killers. I said, the thing for me, like Latrice said, she tell them, like you telling strangers that you love them. I said, what I want you to understand about why I'm here, I said, because I love you. And I said, the killers, the people that get killed, y'all all belong to us. You're all our babies. You're our sons. It's our daughters. It's our nephews. It's our brothers. It's fathers. I said, the thing is, you all belong to us. And we are feeling that. It's hurting us. And he stood there and looked at me, and he took it. And he took the flyer. I've heard a lot of these people say, I hope y'all don't stop. I hope that you don't stop. I've also heard them say that I'm glad you're here, that sometimes we need help. We don't know how to stop. We don't know. We caught up. I couldn't make this stuff up. This is the stuff I heard literally from faces that I don't know, and if I saw them again, I probably wouldn't remember. You know, so the other thing is I'm going to say is that I started feeling, even though I was a parent, I lost a child, and he came from a good house, right? Good home. He didn't have a lot of situations that these other, you know, people may have. And I wanted to say, I know the era that I grew up in. I knew the world that was handed to me is not the community that got handed to these kids. So when I show up sometime at the sacred space rituals, or actually sometime whenever I'm just talking to young people, I apologize. If you want to know, like, what can I do? It's little things along the way we all can do. Anybody that was born in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, you know the community, how it was. You know it was more of a village. You know that Miss Whatever was going to tell if they saw you doing and you would get in trouble. And, you know, like, it was more of a community. And the community is all divided now. It's not, these kids don't even know anything about that kind of stuff. And so I apologize, even though I knew I am the person in my community that help people raise their kids. I'm the Miss Whatever, you know, that was there, that didn't judge them for what they did and how they were. I could see you running down the street with your black hoodie on and know you just did something wrong, and I recognize you because I seen you since you was a little kid. I'm the person that they might come and talk to and tell stuff that they not telling nobody. So if you want to know what you can do, give you. It's like you said, like y'all said, that you will run into, if you open up to it and if you really want to do something, the situations are going to come into your life in the artist ways, artist reasons. They'll show up. They will come to you, and you will have people to say stuff to.
Thank you.
If you feel it, just do that.
Thank you. And that really reminds me of something that our regular host, Eddie Conway, says. He was locked up for 45 years in prison. He was falsely accused of killing a police officer. When he got out, like 5 years ago, he said things in the community are way worse than when he got locked up. And I don't know how many of you saw that chart of how much the wealthy are paying in taxes, but I think there's a direct connection between the investment in social services we're seeing. There's a big fight right now over school funding, and there's a plan to increase funding for schools, which are underfunded by billions of dollars every year. And there's going to be a big fight by wealthy people to keep their taxes low. And I think that's something that we should also, be looking at too. We have another question.
This question is for Leatrice.
Hi, Michelle.
I know I'm supposed to be gone. But I don't know if you addressed this or not. I don't remember it being said. But how do you address people who, when you approach them about the movement, and they're like, I'm not a shooter, you need to be talking to them?
Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
So can we talk
Can we
about
talk
that?
about that?
Yes.
So, like the people in this room right now?
Exactly.
So, the people in this room are not easily identified as killers. Like, that's not who y'all are. So, for those people, they feel like, oh, I don't have to participate in the ceasefire because I'm not out here killing people. And we have the Baltimore Peace Challenge, which is a sister component to the Baltimore Ceasefire, and it speaks directly to everybody who lives in Baltimore City. So thinking about the ways that you are violent, maybe directly or indirectly, thinking about the ways that you benefit from the systems that help to uphold violence, thinking about the way that you use social media, thinking about the language that you use, thinking about how you have biases towards people based on what society tells you to have biases towards people about, and how that is violence. So you don't have to be a shooter. You don't have to be a person who is physically violent towards other people to think differently about how you show up in the world, about what whiteness looks like, about what anti-blackness looks like, about what oppression looks like, about how oppression may not directly impact you, but you might benefit from it in some kind of way. So the Baltimore Peace Challenge challenges you to think about those kinds of things. So it's for everybody. Yes, it's not just for people who kill people. It's for every single living human being in Baltimore City.
Thank you. We have a question.
Hi, my name's Gary. I'm a retired firefighter, and when I heard the brother speak as a surgeon at shock trauma, I helped to transport people to the hospitals on many occasions. Matter of fact, there was one particular story that this thing has just reminded me of. It was because my kid's grandmother lived right up around the station. I was up there like Garrison and Liberty, and I had told my children this particular night, the previous night before this shooting occurred, it's like, do not be within 100 yards of this corner. The very next night, as a 15-year-old kid was shot and killed. I remember picking up his arm, and it bent here at the humerus, right here. Was supposed to, but the bullet had shattered that bone, and he was dead, unfortunately, as well. So it's just like a personal thing, And then when you go to like how many deaths, and then you go like to 1,000 shootings, imagine how many people have had weapons pointed at them with extreme prejudice. I mean, I've had weapons pointed at me like 3 times in my life with extreme prejudice. Believe you me, a sawed-off shotgun, the barrel looks about that big when it's just 4 feet away from you. But on the bigger picture, and like kudos to y'all for doing this, I want you, because this is personal to me, right? I'm a gun owner, and yet I haven't fired my weapons for over 20 years. Speak to the juxtaposition of the desire to protect, meaning your own weapons, versus the actual statistics. And most time you're going to get stolen. You don't use it in defense. But every time we hear about like a 2-year-old getting shot in the stomach because of some road rage, or the situation in Fort Worth, or the previous year where that white female police officer came into that man's apartment and killed him. And then the lack of judicial prudence, all right? That's one part. But I want you to also, please, I want y'all's thoughts and reasoning on the movement to arm teachers and staff at public schools. And then I also want to remind everybody that today in 1966, the Black Panther Party 10-point platform was introduced, and part of that addressed part of what we're talking about here. And of course, Eddie Conway, that Jason talked about a little while ago, was a founding, he was one of the early members of the Black Panther Party. So anyway, I threw a lot at there. Just want to listen to your comments.
I don't think that educators should have guns. I don't want anybody who is responsible for educating children or being in an environment where children are being educated to have a gun, because that doesn't solve the problem, it doesn't address the problem, and it has the potential to create more problems. I really don't know how to answer your first question. I don't know how to answer that question. And I understand that people feel the need to protect themselves. And I'm an idealist when I say that, can we as a society stop creating conditions where people feel like they need a gun to have to protect themselves? So that's my answer.
For me, personally, like yourself, I'm a legal gun owner. And it really starts with the education of it. In inner cities, a gun only means one thing to us. It's for self-defense, truly. Most people that you see out here running around with a gun was a victim. So on average, you got a person that's paranoid and scared, that's feeling like he has to do what he has to do to keep himself from being a victim again. But then two, like I say, education. There's no credible way for a young African-American child to learn all the legal benefits to owning a legal firearm outside of going out here and shooting and robbing. You know, so because the way we deliver it to our kids and others, it really create a problem and a loophole where we can constantly talk about strengthening gun laws. But the truth be told, majority of these guns are bought by people that look like you. Majority of these guns have been confiscated by police 30 years ago. Poles have been destroyed and everything, but yet they're back on the streets. So it goes way beyond us trying to blame the individual for wanting to arm himself when he's in a world against a bunch of crazy people, to be completely honest. The fact that we're even considering arming our teachers shows how crazy we are as a society. To the point that we almost consider our kids a goddamn threat. I mean, truth be told, most of these teachers shouldn't be teaching in the schools that they are, because there's no connection to the community or the child. But everybody want to do the right thing, so we say. The right thing would be you go to your community where people like you could truly benefit. And we feel our community where people like us could benefit. And I'm not even talking about color. I'm just talking about the mindset and the belief systems that we all share as a society. Like I said, we truly have things misconstrued, and we do a lot of blame game, you know, and really don't want to face the facts. But the reality of it is everyone's scared. And to tell somebody that you shouldn't be scared when nobody have your back is idiotic, which is why we're here.
I will add that we know that the NRA, the gun lobby, has a crazy amount of power they've bought in this country, and they've helped defeat a lot of gun reforms. We know that they've helped propose ideas like arming teachers, which is crazy. Nobody does it. We should not do that. But on the other hand, I think the media tends to focus on the amount of guns that exist in America, but what it doesn't focus on is inequality. So you have countries like Switzerland where everyone has a gun, but there's not a lot of violence in those countries, and it's because it's a very equal country. There aren't people, like Lawrence Brown talks about the black, the white owl and the black butterfly. You don't have that level of inequality where people don't have enough to eat. People don't know where the next meal or job is going to come from. That doesn't exist in any other wealthy country in the world. Those conditions, childhood poverty rates of 30%, the conditions these schools are in, that doesn't exist anywhere else in the wealthy world. So I think we have to look at that too, and that's something that the media doesn't like to talk about.
Hi, my name is Lori, and I'm a 21-year resident of Baltimore City. I came here for a job, and I stayed because I love this city. I love this city. And I love Baltimore Ceasefire and the organizers, and I really appreciate everything you do. And I'm here this evening to shamelessly promote a life-affirming event. I am working with 7 or 8 other women to put on a basketball tournament, a women's basketball tournament on the Saturday. That's me.
There's flyers in the back. For
And
that.
yeah, we have flyers. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori.
Hi, thank you for being here. Y'all talked a little bit tonight about the fact that people are trying to eat, and that a lot of violence goes into trying to protect economies. You mentioned whiteness, and maybe some folks don't want to hear about the ceasefire because they don't think they're part of it. I know white people buy drugs, and I know we're a big part of the economy that's hurting people out here. So I wanted to suggest maybe white folks need to have a cease copping weekend. Yeah.
I like him.
Don't go down to Penn North this weekend.
I like him a lot.
Stay up in Hartford County.
I like him.
I'm just saying, maybe you could talk afterwards, because maybe that needs to be said.
You better come through with that thunder.
Sorry. Come on, man. I don't know if there's a question in this. I got a letter from a friend of mine. He's up Hagerstown, and when he was a kid, somebody told him he needed to protect his corner, and he did. And it haunts him to this day. And I've never seen a man who is as tough just cry like that as the first time he told me the story. And I guess I didn't want to read this letter, to be honest with you. I waited till I came here tonight to open it and read it. And I don't really know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I think it's incredible that folks who have been the victims of so much are here tonight talking about the folks that have done so much, and that it's a circle on both sides, and there's victims all around us. And thank you.
Thank you. So I want to say something really quickly because he mentioned Hagerstown, because of connections between Baltimore Ceasefire and people who do mediation in Hagerstown. Hagerstown decided to model what Ceasefire does, so they don't have an issue with shootings. They have an issue with addiction and overdose in their community. So they created a Cease Pain weekend in Hagerstown. It happens when Ceasefire weekends happen here. And so what they do is encourage people in their community to avoid using drugs and doing things that are harmful to them. And it just speaks to the influence of movements that when you create a model and it's demonstrated that the model works, people can take it and apply it to their own community to meet their own community needs and to impact community.
And real quick, if I could, I just want to, salute my guy because what he said was deep, man. Like, people really don't understand it's back to the individual accountability, and that was major what he said. So I really want to tip my hat to him, man, because people ain't looking at it like that.
I wanted to comment on that too a little bit. Like, when I first saw this data, I started mapping it, right, and showing it to people. And one thing that I noticed was like people who lived in that what is it, White L, would like find their neighborhood on the map and see that it was low in shootings, and then be like, oh man, like it sucks I can't do anything about this. It was like the most depressing reaction I had. I thought I was going to present this data to people and everyone was going to feel energized and start doing stuff. But that was, I think, the modal reaction I saw from white people living in that L that's mostly spared from violent death. But you can't, like, if you live in that L, you're no more than like 30 blocks from a neighborhood that has one of the highest rates of homicide in the world. And you can't live that close to something like that and not be causally related to it. I don't mean related to it like you know someone who knows someone who knows someone. I mean, you're causally related to that if you live that close. So the fact that you can find yourself on that map at all means that you're causally wound up in all of this, and you kind of have an obligation to do something. What that is, I think, has to look different for different people. You can't just like discount where you live when you decide how to show up. But I mean, Cease Coppin, that's a great idea. You can find creative ways to do something, but I think I haven't figured out how to like present this stuff and get that sense of energy for everyone without people finding their neighborhood and like copping out. But you do have an obligation to try something.
Yes.
We have another question.
How y'all doing tonight?
Hello.
So I have a statement. I wanted to share something with everyone here tonight. I originally came here tonight to shamelessly promote an event I'm doing that's about nonviolence, but I'm going to put that aside tonight based on everything I've been hearing, and I just wanted to share something about a personal experience that I had. I grew up sheltered. I grew up in Pikesville in the 60s and 70s when it was majority Jewish, and I didn't know anything about crime. My father was a principal. My mom was a Baltimore City school teacher. We had no struggles, so I was oblivious to the things that may have been happening in the city. It wasn't as bad back then as it is now, but it was bad. I remember a new skating ring opening up on Pennsylvania Avenue, Shake and Bake, and I was like, I'm an avid skater, and a friend of mine went down there and we go skating. We were outside after the skating ring was closing and talking, and someone put a gun to my head. And I haven't talked about this in years. Someone put a gun to my head, and he didn't even ask any questions, just pulled the trigger. And the gun jammed. I could describe that gun to you right now, like if it was sitting in front of me right now. I could describe the gun. They just pulled the trigger. And like you said, brother, it was people carry guns or do things because things have happened to them. I didn't live a violent life. I didn't grow up in the hood. I didn't have all these issues. From that night, I decided I was going to get as many people as I could. I was a college student at Frostburg State University, and my life changed. I left school, and I knew that I was going to get everybody I can get before they got me. By the grace of God, I never killed anybody or never shot anybody, but I spent years just being a hellion in the city. My parents were like, who is this guy? Like, we didn't raise this guy, and I was getting in trouble and getting in so many issues. And before the 12 o'clock boys, we were out there ripping and running on dirt bikes and motorcycles on the street and running from the police. Back then it was Foxtrot helicopter chasing us all over town. And I was just living this reckless life because somebody put a gun to my head. And it's amazing that this ceasefire movement is not only saving lives. We talk about the people who were shot, we talk about the people who were murdered, but we don't talk enough about the people who had an experience that is life-changing. And there's many more, just like you said, over 300 killed, but over 1,000 shot, and probably 20,000 who's had encounters like mine that were life-changing. It changed my life. It changed my attitude. I turned into an entirely different person. And eventually God caught up to me, and I got saved, and I moved into the city to try to make a difference. But point being is that I am so appreciative. I don't have a question, but I just want to say I appreciate everything that is being done here tonight. This situation is, like I said, I came about an event that just went out the window, just listening to what everybody's speaking about. And it's a blessing. And please continue to do what you all doing. Don't get weary in well-doing. And I would love to be an ambassador somehow if you all can help me. That's my question. How can I become an ambassador?
Oh, all right. Make sure we talk before we leave. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think we have time for one more question.
Is it ready? Oh, thank you. Hi, y'all. Thank you again so much for everything that you do. You're all so amazing, and I'm so lucky to have met half of this group personally and call you friends. The question I have is, I am honored and blessed to work with youth in Baltimore City. They are beautiful. They're amazing. And when I first get students, we talk a lot about the systems that you mentioned, because I know there's a lot of unlearning this internalized stuff around this is us, this is our fault, and how do we move from this is us to this is a systematic issue. But I think when we first start talking about killing and murders and violence, a lot of when I first get students and the first time we talk about these things, and about at least 80 to 85% of my students have had an extremely close family member who has been murdered. But their reaction is there's this level of the people who have lost the sense of hope in themselves, and then I feel like my students are in a position that's have separated themselves. And so what I want to know is, and so the way that they say that is well, we are not this city. This is not us. This is not our city. It's not our place. When I graduate, I'm ready to dip out of here. And so what I want to know is what is that difference between the folks who have some sense of hope, but it stops with themselves and not with their community. And so their answer is dip and go, save myself. What is the difference between those folks, and what is the thing that inspires the other group that's but this is me and this is my city and I am a part of the solution and the turnaround about this?
So I understand people who don't want to be in this environment. I understand people who are so traumatized by everything that is happening and that has happened in Baltimore that they just can't stay here. And I used to get upset about it. I used to be really angry, how dare you leave? We need everybody here to help to fix this. And I realized that is a form of violence, making somebody stay in a space where they really just don't want to be. So it is important for me to honor their decision to want to leave, and at the same time, ground myself in this idea that I'm not leaving Baltimore. I have no intentions on leaving here. It gets really hard sometimes. And hearing that ceasefire works, and then in between ceasefire weekends seeing an uptick in violence and murder is hard. And that's the only way that I can describe that. This work is personal to me. It was personal to me before I lost my niece. and I believe in my city. Like that, like at the core of my being, I believe in Baltimore City. So I know that no matter what, I have challenged myself with this notion that I will die in this city doing work to help to restore Baltimore. If you'd have asked me the question before ceasefire started, I would have said that the people who leave are cowards and that they, good riddance, we don't need you anyway. But this movement has healed the part of me that would have judged them. And so I don't want anybody to stay in a space where they don't feel safe. I don't want anybody to stay in a space where they feel like they would be ineffective and that they are taking up space and not doing anything to help themselves or others. But I'm not that person. And I know people who are not those people. So yeah.
Personally, I would have to say to those individuals, kind of what she said, not mad at you, because in this line of work, you need all, capable bodies that's able and willing, and if you ain't willing, you truly in the way, so I really can't force you to stay if you don't want to. I say our city is beautiful and it's going to thrive, with or without you. It would just be amazing if you wanted to be part of it. I had this conversation a lot with my friends. A lot of them do music and things, and I be trying to. They all want to go to Atlanta and all these places, and I be trying to tell them, Atlanta was nowhere until the people there made it what it was. Houston was nothing until they made it. So we got to make our city great again. That's right. And if you don't want to be part of it, understand and appreciate it. We want the ones that want to be part of it, and we're going to do it.
Let's give our panelists a big round of applause.
Justin. So, part of somebody talked about becoming an ambassador for Baltimore Ceasefire. I want to take the opportunity right now. So if you are a ceasefire ambassador, please stand up. Please stand up. So these are people who were so moved and felt so. Dimitri, why you not standing up? You think I ain't see you sitting there like, hi, Dimitri, who felt so compelled to be a part of the movement that they wanted to get inside of it. And we could not do what we do without them. They show up for their city in ways that are absolutely amazing. And I love y'all, and thank you for taking this ride. And last but not least, I want to shout out Erica Bridgeford. And when people ask me, so there are hundreds of organizations and movements in Baltimore City that are working to heal. When people ask the question, what's so special about ceasefire? What is the magic of ceasefire? I tell people all the time that this movement would absolutely not be what it is if it was not for the heart and the spirit of that woman. The way that she moves, the way that she operates, the way that she lives her life is absolute magic. And so she has taken it upon herself to spread her magic all over Baltimore City and to dedicate her life to what she was doing already. So a lot of people think that, oh, she just started this ceasefire, that's cute. Like who is she? Why is she a thing? And she's been doing peace work in Baltimore City for over 25 years. So she is not new to the idea of healing people and saving lives. So thank you, and I love you.
And personally, for me, I would just real quick like to give a couple shout outs to people that really helped me get on the path of positivity. One, Community Infusion for really partnering with me and helping my dream come true. I gotta give a big shout out to OSI and all my OSI fellows out there. Keep up the work, man. It's real out here, man. We need it. Mr. C at Rose Street Community Center for really being on me and forcing me to wake up and realize the potential I got. And Safe Streets for just keeping it real with me, and I just say paying me for the work that I was already doing. and everyone that's in this room tonight for coming out and just supporting everything that we doing, man. We all need it, and I just want y'all to give yourselves a hand, man. Thank y'all.
And I had one quick announcement, which is that we did submit these findings to the American Journal of Public Health. Hopefully they'll be published. They're under review. Latrice is co-authoring, Erica Bridgeford's co-authoring, Simon's co-authoring, all the way down from New York City. So excited to meet you after this. We made the analysis a little bit more rigorous. Those numbers I gave you, 52%, worst case 33%, best case 67% are the updated numbers. And we also tested, a couple people were like, they suggested the idea that maybe people wait until after ceasefire to hurt people, essentially. They're like, okay, we won't hurt someone on Sunday, but when Monday comes, that's when we'll shoot someone or whatever it is. We actually checked for that, so we had the 3-day ceasefire, right, effect, but we also checked for the 3 days following, and then we also checked for the 3-day weekend following, right? And on both of those 3-day periods, there's, if anything, a continued decrease. There's not an uptick immediately after ceasefire, either in the 3 days following or the weekend following. So we were able to show some additional findings like that, and hopefully you'll see it out in the next, peer review takes forever, so a couple months, I don't know.
So I wanna thank Peter. We met at a public meeting. He came to learn about Baltimore Ceasefire, and his contribution to the ceasefire is his work. So we didn't ask him to do the research. He just got really curious about, I wonder what would happen if, and put in so many man hours just on his own, and then came to us and was like, hey, I have this research. And we were like, what? And so, nobody paid him to do it. He really did just do it on his own, and we love you for that. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, but I'm just measuring what you guys are doing, right? I'm literally just measuring what you have been doing for the past 2 years before I even showed up.
We weren't able to do that, so thank you.
Thank you both for doing the stuff bit. I'm just measuring.
So we're going to be following Ceasefire at The Real News. If you don't already follow us, check back for updates. And we'll be following up on Peter's research and following up with Alex. And so I want to thank you all for being here tonight. If you have a minute, we have surveys in the back. We'd love to get your feedback on these events. We have them every 2 weeks here at Ida B's table. And we rely on your contributions. If you're able to give something today to help keep these going, no amount is too small. So thank you all. Have a good night. Appreciate it.